Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. I'm Lani, for those of you that don't know me. So as Laura said, I'm very, very passionate about this topic, and I think it's something that we need to talk about needs to be discussed in the proper setting, and needs to be discussed in the right way. I do want to say everyone's welcome to ask questions while I'm talking. If you want to ask a question, you don't necessarily want to say it, you're welcome to just send it in the chat. You can send it just to me. And then I can read it out and I don't have to say who it's from. And at the end, as Laura said, we'll stop the recording and then there can be question time afterwards. Just because, it's a sensitive topic, people might not always feel comfortable on the recording. Anything else to say? I guess we'll get started. Okay, let's just, in the classic Zoom, I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Give me a thumbs up. Okay. All right, so what are we looking at tonight, right? The lovely title is Judaism's View on Intimacy. I'm sorry, it is Netflix versus Judaism too, right? So I'm going to start with a few sources. We're just going to sources from the modern world, basically. We're going to look at, okay, just a few different things, and then we're going to go into and talk about them a bit more. So Taylor Swift, I think most people probably know who Taylor Swift is a singer. She has a song called 15. It says, Abigail gave everything she had to a boy who changed his mind. We both cried. I'm just going to read these now and we'll go into them a bit more later. Then from an interview from Cosmopolitan magazine, it's Mariah Carey is also a singer. I've only been with 5 people in my life, so I'm kind of a prude, honestly, compared to most others in the field. And then the interviewer was writing, what a flex considering she can have whoever she wants. Okay. And then the last one was I took from Gossip Girl, was a TV show that was very popular when I was a teenager, and it was very, very inappropriate. That was, and they took that fact that was very inappropriate, and they were so proud of it, and that was their advertising campaign. So they took these reviews that people wrote, mind-blowingly inappropriate, every parent's nightmare, a nasty piece of work, and they put them on these posters. And these were the posters that were going on the side of buses and on, on whatever the ads. These were the reviews. They was so proud of this. So wait, I'm just going to talk for a bit, so I'll stop the share for now. It's nice to see everyone that I can see. Okay, so basically we're going to start with looking at the messages that we see in society today, okay, that are kind of portrayed to us and to our children, and just we're constantly bombarded with them from every angle. So we kind of have 2 extremes here, with 2 extremes on the spectrum, what I'm going to label them as. There's a woman in Israel called Ariel Mavarach, who has written a whole book on this topic, on the kind of the unhealthy discourse we have in society today, and then how we can kind of have the healthy Jewish discourse. And she categorizes them into purity culture, like puritanical culture, and over-sexualization. So let's start with purity culture. What are we talking about? So a big push when Christianity started and they split away from Judaism, a long time ago, was a big element that they focused on was the purity. Okay, was that they see anything sexual, anything intimate, even between a husband and a wife, as kind of a b'diavad. Okay, so puritanical discourse, when we talk about it, it sees any sexuality and sexual behaviors as lowly and negative. Okay, it tries to deny that we have these feelings at all. It says we basically just have to ignore them, and it only sees them for reproduction. Okay, for procreation, only for having children. That's really the only reason we can talk about these things. In early Christianity, John said, which was one of the Christian, I actually don't know the right word, saints, I'm not sure. He said, better to marry than to burn in hell. Okay, they see it as a concession. It's okay, if you can't be a priest, you can't be a nun, you can get married. It's a bit of a contrast for them. I'm not going to get into it because their theory is not my area of expertise, but on the one hand, they have like us this mitzvah of puruvah, be fruitful and multiply, but on the other hand, it's better to marry than to burn in hell. It's okay, if you really can't control yourself, then get married and then you can do it. But they very much see it as what we call a b'diavad situation, not it's a concession. It's not ideal. And there are some sects I know of Catholicism. I saw a very interesting video recently. Apparently this is a bit more the extreme sects, but where they only believe that marital relations, being intimate between a husband and a wife, is only in a time when women are fertile. So when a woman's pregnant, no, because she's already pregnant, they have no reason to be together again. You know, not just like niddah, where certain times a month you can't be together, they can only be together in the very few days where she's fertile, anything like that. So there's no discussion of birth control, it's just only for procreation. That's the only reason we're allowed to be together. Okay, so it's like in this purity culture, it's kind of like, I don't know how much you guys have heard about like there's the sex education in the schools in America. I don't know that much about it in England yet, but I've seen that they have kind of talked about it a bit. In America, there's like, especially in the more Christian states, the attitude seems to be, let's just not talk about it and hope for the best. It's like they're not willing to discuss it. They're not willing to discuss like, you know, how to be safe, how not to get diseases, how to actually use protection. There's a lot of parents push back against it because they're like, oh, we don't want to talk about it because then the teenagers are going to do it. But if you look at the rates of teen pregnancy in America, especially in those areas, it just doesn't seem to work. Something seems to be going wrong there. It doesn't add up. Just pretending that, you know, these desires don't exist, pretending that it's all fine, we're just going to sweep it under the rug. It doesn't seem to be working. So that the source we have from Taylor Swift's song. Okay, so when I think she wrote this album when she was also quite young, around 15, 16, I guess. And Abigail, she's talking about a friend in the song. Abigail gave everything she had to a boy who changed his mind. So she gave everything she had. Well, you know, I mean, they're talking about her virginity. She slept with a boy, and I think the next line is like, you know, about how he loved her. But Abigail, so that's everything she had. That was her value. Now that her value is gone, she doesn't have anything left. You know, and they're both, and he changed his mind. But you know, this purity culture tells you that that's your value. Once you've lost your virginity, that's it. You have no more value. And something I will say is that, which Ariam Avarach, who I spoke about in the beginning, also addresses, so that this puritanical discourse is prevalent in Judaism, and we do need to recognize that. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't exist. As in, what I'm going to talk about is this, and then other cultures we see. And then how, you know, a healthy Jewish response and how we should look at it and how we can understand from our sources. But, you know, we need to acknowledge that it does exist within Judaism. But we need to, in my opinion, and a lot of the people that are, you know a lot more than me, try and make sure that when we're teaching our children and when we're thinking about it with ourselves, talking about it in a healthy way within the realms of obviously halacha and within the realms of Jewish thought and huge thinkers that are much more knowledgeable than us. But it's not necessarily the mainstream approach in Judaism, especially in, you know, the modern Orthodox world, but it does exist. It is there. Okay, and then let's look at the other side, okay, which is the over-sexualization, okay, and I'm sure you can all think of examples of this. Think about, you know, TV shows, what's been popular lately, Bridgerton, okay, people say it's basically just like naked people all the time. You know, I gave the Gossip Girl, which is down below. When I was a teenager, everyone was watching that. It was literally like just naked people all the time. It's because what happened when did this like over-sexualization start? It was basically like the antithesis. It was like it's called like the sexual releasing. It was like the anti-Christian puritanical movement. They were like, no, we don't like these boundaries. We don't like these feelings of guilt that we end up, you know, having. It started a lot with like the free love movement in the 60s. They were trying to get away from like the puritanical view, the guilt that came along with it. We're trying to go, but they ended up going the complete opposite side of the spectrum, okay? Taking away any boundaries, any discussion of any set of boundaries, they see that as puritanical. You know, we have to let anyone be with anyone, do everything, no matter what they want. There's no discussion. There's no insinuation that a physical relationship has an emotional and a mental impact. We can't discuss it. What do you mean? You know, women can be like men and men can be like women in terms of like, you know, the way it affects them. There's no discussing that maybe women get more attached after a physical relationship. There's none of that. There's no discussion of boundaries allowed in this culture. All right, okay, so yeah. So as I was saying, this is, you know, kind of continued on until today. And we see it everywhere, you know, think about posters on the side of buses, when you go to the shopping center, the ads on TV, everything. It's just like naked people everywhere, everything's fine, and like there's no issues with, you know, things just aren't really censored. You can turn on the TV and watch anything, there's no censorship. We're just bombarded with it in society. Going back to the Gossip Girl, right? Like they took that, I explained that they took these reviews they got from like the Parent Society, and I'm not sure where else they were from. You know, every parent's nightmare, and they were so proud of that. They made that their slogan. They were like, yes, we're so happy. We're so happy to, you know, to be this inappropriate, to be so groundbreaking and so mind-blowing that this is going to be like our degel, this is going to be like our flag. And what I think is interesting about the quote in the middle here from Cosmopolitan magazine is it's somewhere in the middle, okay? It shows that you, even within this, like, you know, released culture where we're all free to do whatever we want and be with anyone, we still have these like weird boundaries and numbers, right? I've only been with 5 people in my life, so I'm kind of a prude. It's like, okay, so you're putting a number on it. So there is a number. I've only been with 5 people, so I'm a prude. But if I would get to a number where I wouldn't be a prude anymore. You know, I'd either be normal or I'd be, you know, whatever they call it, you know, loose, whatever you want to call it. There is a number. As much as people try and pretend that these definitions don't exist, it still very much exists. And then, you know, they're saying, oh, what a flex that she's such a prude because she could have whoever she wants. It's like, okay, hold on. Which message are we giving here? I think within this like 1 sentence or 2 sentences, it's like we've got so many conflicting things here. She's a prude, but there is a number, and she could have whoever she wants, but so it's good that she didn't do whoever she wants. It's like there's just so many messages all the time that we're seeing. You know, this is from a magazine. So many messages we're seeing all the time. Okay, there's an interesting article from Naomi Wolf, who has a doctorate in, I think, sociology. She wrote an article which was quite groundbreaking because it was hadn't really been discussed. It was in the early 2000s about pornography, which is also something that when you're now learning to, like, I would learn to be a color teacher with the Eden Center. I'm not sure if everyone's heard of them, but they're an amazing place based in Israel, based in Yerushalayim. They do a lot of work in terms of making mikvah accessible, and when they do their color teaching courses and their balani, like the mikvah attendant courses, they very much train you not just in the halacha but in everything around it. And a big discussion these days is about pornography and how much people have been exposed to from a young age. And I know that some of you heard Dr. DeBow when she was here in Manchester, and she also spoke a lot about that and the fact that, you know, most people these days have seen it, we're bombarded with these images, and it's really, really unhealthy. So when Naomi Wolf's in an article, she was talking about the fact that pornography has changed the nature of what men expect from women. That, you know, men are used to seeing, it's not just like seeing a picture, you know, once upon a time there was Playboy and they saw a picture, and even if the picture was a bit touched up, it was still just a picture. Now it's like they see videos, and like the videos are photoshopped the whole time, and it's just completely changes the expectation of what once was. It used to be like, oh, you know, even just being with any woman is like very exciting, and these days it's not only the men have this expectation, but also women like feel like this is the standard they have to live up to, and women see this and they're like, well, I'm not constantly, you know, waxed and plucked and always, you know, whatever goes on. She's basically said that it's been proven in research as well that this high exposure to pornography deadens people's capacity to enjoy intimacy in real life. And it's really having an issue, this culture where everyone thinks it's okay to watch this all the time. It's really causing issues in people's marriages, people's relationships. It's causing a lot of problems. Okay, and the last point I want to say on this topic is the way that it's represented in the media, kind of going on from this, right? So even if, you know, teenagers aren't watching straight, you know, explicit like pornography, for like what we were saying before, Bridgerton, Gossip Girl, I don't know, most TV shows that are on these days, there are some, you know, there are sex scenes, there are things that people are seeing, and it's normally not a reflection of reality. It's not, you know, especially for like the first time when teenagers are seeing it and they don't know. I deal with this a lot with color of like expectations, and it's like, oh well, I have seen TV, and on TV it looks like this and this, and it's you know, we're having to take this assumption and completely reteach them that no, this is not what a normal relationship looks like. You need, first of all, we need consent, we need discussion beforehand, we need to know, you know, what you're okay with. It's not going to happen in 2 seconds, it's not going to be beautiful, it's not going to be, everything's going to be clean and fancy, as in whatever. Obviously it should be, you know, an intimate relationship between a husband and wife in the right setting should be wonderful, but it's like chatanim and khalat these days are coming with these preconceived notions that can be very damaging. And it's just very hard to escape. If you've grown up in any sort of modern society with any sort of, you know, technology, it's very, very difficult to escape. And it's just something that is really affecting a large portion of society. Okay, so the next thing I want to look at, does anyone have any questions so far? I can't see everyone. Anyone questions, comments, feel free to write to me in the chat if you want to say anything or ask anything. Okay, so the next thing I want to look at is, okay, so what are modern day, before we get into Torah sources, Let's see, what do modern day psychologists and marriage counselors have to say about this? Let's look at research, right? Like I was in a former life where I was an occupational therapist. We spent a lot of time looking at scientific articles, understanding evidence-based things. Let's see. So, I think the first thing we all know is that just because society pushes a certain message, it doesn't make it right. It doesn't mean it's the right message we should be absorbing, and it doesn't mean that's the way to learn things. Okay, so think about weight and women's body issues. I don't know if we kind of my generation and up, was pounded in this way also by a lot of images of very, very skinny women. That was what was very fashionable when I was growing up, but basically anorexia. It was constantly in TV, in magazines. That was what we saw. And I think today it's really impressive that there's very much, it's shifting, it's changing. And actually I saw the other day, I went to Marks and Spencer's, and in the ad, there was, it was in the women's department, and there were two women in their underwear. And one of them was, I guess, a normal model, and one of them was a plus size model. But even the normal model, she was bending over a bit, and she had a little rolls on her tummy, and I was like, oh my gosh, the fact that they didn't shop that out is groundbreaking. The fact that they didn't Photoshop it out is groundbreaking. It means things are changing. Once 10 years ago, that would have been photoshopped out 100%. There was no room for flaws. So you can see that things in society, it does change. But I think we are acknowledging, as I've seen a lot of this on the internet, as a generation, as kind of, as I said, my generation hopefully is changing. But it's had a big issue. It's had a big impact on women and the way we see ourselves. I know a lot from talking to a lot of the women that I talk to about these kind of issues in intimacy. A big problem is body image. And it's really, really hard to escape. And I think it's because of the media we've been inundated with. It's just an example. Anyway, that's just an example of how the imaging from society can affect us. And I think it's the same thing with the way society talks about intimacy and sexuality. Okay, so the Gottman Institute, if anyone's heard of it, they're leading marriage. They're very well founded in research. If anyone wants to look up, they have interesting articles. The Gottman Institute, the fact that they call it the love cocktail, basically 11 different hormones that are released. So oxytocin they call it the love hormone. It's released when women nurse their babies. And it makes you love the baby. It's cute. It's also women release it after being intimate with man or the person. And they, basically talk about, in the Gottman had an article about the 11 different love chemicals released after sex. And it's crazy. So we're all here trying to pretend, not maybe not us, but society is trying to pretend that one night stands are normal and it's totally fine, it's not going to have an impact on me, I can do whatever I want. But on a basic biological level, you're releasing 11 love hormones, and we're going to try and pretend we're trying so hard to pretend that doesn't affect us, and I think it just doesn't really work. Okay, then one of the marriage counselors from their website said, 20 years as a counselor has told me nothing has the ability to degrade, cheapen, wound, and rob a sense of who you are, as does sex outside of its original design. Its original design, here in the article, was talking about long-term relationships and marriage. Saying the original design is supposed to be between two people who love each other. As we're going to see in a lot of the Jewish sources, talking about a way to bring a husband and wife closer together. And these days, it's often done before. People, get into these relationships where they can be sleeping together, but they can't have an open conversation about, are we boyfriend or girlfriend? What labels are we putting on this? Because you can have the total open physicality, but you can't have the open communication. And I think it's just crazy that has gone so backward. Okay, any questions? Okay. All right, so what do we see in Judaism? Let's have a look. Okay, I want to ask questions. No pressure to answer. But okay, there's in reference to what we've just seen. I kind of spoke about two main ideas: purity culture and the over-sexualization culture. Do you feel like you've seen either of these extremes taught within Judaism? If anyone feels like they want to share, or has everyone had really good, healthy education, which would be wonderful to hear. No, that's the ideal, but sometimes these things do seep through.
I get the impression that from schools, it's nothing. It doesn't exist.
Sometimes.
We're not going to talk about it. So the first time the boys discover anything, or the girls discover anything, is when they're at Hassan color classes.
Yeah, there definitely sometimes is that element of the purity culture, because we want to be careful, because we don't want to tell them too much, we don't want to talk too much. And there are certain things halakha within Judaism that can make it feel like we are saying anything intimate, anything is like that is inappropriate. Like, think about, I understand from a teenager's perspective that when you look at Shamanegia, when you look at Sneer, you can be like, oh, we're always being told no touching, we're being told cover up, we're being told all these things. And it's like, no, it's bad. But something that people, often don't think about is that when we're saying, Shamanegia, you're not allowed to touch boys, you're not allowed to touch girls, it's not that it's bad. It's not that we see this as bad, as we'll see, but that it needs to be in the right context. It really needs to be in the right context. And that's what's very hard sometimes to understand. And it's not, if it's not properly explained, then it for sure can go, unfortunately, into that like purity culture. And it also, it has been explained, like, I don't know, even personally, when I was a teenager and we had like the Shamanegia talk on Counterpoint, which is like a Jewish camp my school did. I remember someone saying, like, you're like a diamond, and like the more a diamond is like touched, the less shiny it is. And like, I know that, I've heard people say that. I definitely would never say that personally to a girl, but that whatever, it's been said. But hopefully we can, address these issues and go forward. Okay, so I do want to start with a disclaimer before I start getting into all the Jewish sources, which is that we can't pretend that Judaism has only one opinion. So I'm going to be showing the healthy Jewish opinion, but we definitely have this concept of Shivim Panim LaTorah, right? The Torah has 70 faces. There are lots of different opinions, and we can't ignore sources on other end. Well, personally, I would say that majority of the sources do point to a healthy attitude towards intimacy. It is possible to kind of take some of the ones on the end spectrum and twist them. For example, there are some Kabbalistic texts that have been interpreted to basically take away the roles of halacha. Like right within Judaism, we say, like intimacy relations are permitted within a marriage between a man and a woman in their bedroom. That is the basic halacha. Within that, there's questions, but that's generally the accepted halacha. And there are some Kabbalistic texts that are interpreted as, oh no, we're taking it to the other extreme, where basically like it's kind of like to the over-sexualization, to anyone, it's fine. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have people like the Gur Hasidim, who are only together between a husband and wife. They're only intimate twice a month, once on mikveh night, and then one other Shabbat, one other Friday night. And they take it to the other extreme, and there's no physical touch between them except for those 2 times. And they take it to the other extreme. And look, there are some sources that support that. But the overall majority, in Judaism, we recognize that we have hilurim, right? We have, how do you translate this English, Laura? Hilurim, like desires and things that, test us and that are difficult, and that we don't try to pretend that our humanity basically doesn't exist. And we know that, sexual desire is part of being human, and we try and find the right way to deal with that. Okay. So there are some things people say, oh, it's different, it's, we're in the modern day century. So yes, some attitudes do evolve with time, and that's a part of Judaism. We adapt and we evolve, and we have halacha and we have rabbanim that guide us, right? Like I know in the women's Beit Midrash, sometimes you learn with Rabbi Cohen about modern halachat. Even when I was in Midrash, we had a shiur called Contemporary Halacha. Basically talking about, every time we have something new, like a dishwasher, okay, can we use a dishwasher on Shabbat? Same thing. We have to discuss with Rabbanim and get answers to questions. So obviously Judaism does adapt with the modern world, but it's still always within the framework of halacha and within the boundaries of like our ethics of Judaism. And I don't think anything of like that has changed. Okay, so I'm going to show you my sources, as I said, of what ideally, you know, we should be seeing in what we can take as a positive Jewish attitude to intimacy. You mean like, Lani, how are you so sure that Judaism has a positive attitude? You know, you're a modern 21st century woman, like you're just putting your own spin on things, you're taking the sources that you like and like, you know, using them to your advantage. Well, okay, let's start in the most basic sources, as in, let's go back as far as we can. Oh, hold on, I need to share my screen. Everyone see? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, so let's go back to the Torah. Okay, this is no new source. This is nothing that's changed. The number one is that we see straight away in the Torah, we have 2 mitzvot about intimacy. Okay, the first one is in Bereshit, Pruvu, okay, be fertile and multiply, however you want to translate that into English, which I think we all know as a mitzvah. And the second one comes from Shmot. And it says, if a man takes basically a new wife, he will not withhold with her food, clothing, or her conjugal rights, right? Her right to marital intimacy between them. So straight away we see we have 2 mitzvot associated with intimacy, you know, within a marriage. And the first thing is we don't have mitzvot about avera, right? We have Isurim, we don't have mitzvot. So the first thing we see are 2 mitzvot about this. At least there are some people that say there's another one, you know, commanding a man, and he makes his wife happy. So that's the first thing, basically. 2 mitzvot straight from the get-go. And another example is the fact that marital relations and intimacy is permitted even when we know a woman isn't fertile. Okay, if we know a woman is infertile, she can't have children for medical reasons, whatever it is, they're still permitted to be together. If we know she can't have children, if she's you know, postmenopause, husband and wife are still permitted to be together, and it's still considered something important and a mitzvah. So that shows us that it's not just for puruvu, it's not just for procreation, but it's clearly we attribute more meaning to it than just that. Okay, and I want to show you some other sources. Okay, so this is the Mishnah Torah. Okay, it's also not, so it's not just that we have mitzvot about it. Let's also say, both of them shall not be intoxicated, nor sluggish, nor in mourning, nor either of them in such state, nor when she be asleep, nor by overpowering her, so, you know, not by force, but with consent and happy mood of both, with a few pleasant and light-hearted words to please her being, stilling his urge, basically, you know, saying that not only they can't both be drunk, it has to be consensual. We see that, you know, very clearly. And this is in the Rishonim here, but they both have to be in the mood for it. And not only that, but they should, you know, we should make it a good thing, pleasant and light-hearted words, you know, it should not impudently and not disassociate immediately, not just like after they finish being together, it's like, okay, bye. It's like, no, you should have time, you should cuddle, this should be a nice moment, right? This shouldn't just be like, okay, let's do the act and bye. It's like, no, this should be something that brings them together. It should be something that is ultimately, I think we'll see in all the sources, ultimately it's a deepening of the emotional relationship through the physical relationship. Okay, and then there's quite a few sources in the Gemara about this. I brought 2 just as an example, basically. I think it's very interesting to see. Sorry, I just need a drink. Talking a lot, if anyone wants to interrupt me. So Rabbi Bar Rav Chana said to Abaye, if a donkey driver who is already married wants to become a camel driver, what is the halacha? Okay, what's the relevance of this? Basically, is he permitted to change his profession in order to earn more money from his work, even though this means he reduces the frequency with which he engages in conjugal relations with his wife? So basically, he'll earn more, he'll have a higher salary, but they'll be able to be intimate less often. And he was answered, he is not allowed to change his profession without her permission. He needs his wife's permission. Okay. And then there's another Gemara basically saying that whoever knows his wife fears her, whoever knows his wife desires him and he does not visit her is called a sinner. And again, just down the mouse, a man is obligated to visit his wife for the purpose of having intercourse when he is about to depart on a journey, as it is stated, and you shall know, take peace in your tent. basically in all the sources we see about this in the Gemara, put all the power in the women's hands. They say it all has to be, the man has to give the woman, right? Most people know from the Ketubah that, you know, if a man fails to please his wife in an intimate way, that she can get her Ketubah money back. You know, all these examples we see, it all puts the power in the woman's hands. It's very much about what the woman wants, when the woman wants it. You know, he has to satisfy her. And it's not just like this, not something that's just for the man, which also we see a lot in kind of modern society today. But here it's very much like, no, let's put it in the woman's hands. Let's let her lead the relationship, and make sure that she has what she needs from her husband, whatever that may be. I think it's very interesting to see that. Okay, and then we have the Igeret HaKodesh, which is from the 13th century. So also let's see that it's not just modern people talking about this, right? Because you're like, okay, I want to say at the beginning, people have asked me before, it's like, is this a topic that can be talked about? Should we be talking about this? And I think it's very important that we do talk about it within the right forum. You know, I think a group of from women who want to learn about this in the right way is an appropriate forum. I think if we're talking with younger people, it's obviously going to be very different. But it's not just, you know, coming from me, once again, Lani, this, you know, 21st century woman. It's like, okay, Igeret HaKodesh is the holy letter. We're actually not 100% sure who it's written by, but people think it's Ramban. Anyway, it's written in the 13th century. And okay, so it's very interesting to see what he says. It says, when you and your wife are engaged in sexual union, do not behave lightheartedly and regard this act as vain, idle, improper. Therefore, first introduce her into the mood with gentle words that excite her emotion, appease her mind, and delight her with joy. So not only is he, number one, talking about this, number two, he's basically giving advice, being like, you know, you've got to, you know, he understands women. He says, you know, we've got to appeal to the emotional side. We've got to talk to her first. We've got to, like, you know, get her excited. It's not just going to be like, okay, Yala, let's go to the bedroom, sweetie. No, he's understanding. He's giving advice. He's giving tips. It's like, this is showing that, you know, this isn't a modern recent thing because society has changed. No, Judaism has been talking about this for a long time and talking about it on a detailed level of how to do it and what we should be doing. So thus you unite your mind and intention with hers. Say to her words which in part arouse her passion, closeness, love, will, and erotic desire, and in part invoke in her reverence for Hashem, piety, and modesty. Never impose yourself upon her nor force her. I think it's beautiful. He's saying, you know, arouse in her passion, closeness, love, and also, you know, but also keep like making it holy, you know, her reverence for Hashem. For any sexual union without an abundance of passion, love, and will is without the divine presence. Okay, so if it's, you know, that's Hashem isn't there, basically, if it doesn't have those things, if it's not positive, do not quarrel with her nor act violently whenever coitus is involved. The Talmud says, a lion rashes and then eats and has no shame, so acts the brute. He hits and then cohabits and has no shame. Rather, court and attract her first to you first with gracious and seductive, as well as refined and gentle words, so that both your intentions be for the sake of Hashem. Do not hurry in arousing passion. Prolong till she is ready in a passionate mood. Approach her lovingly and passionately so that she reaches her orgasm first. There's quite a like radical and very impressive message here. Like, I think, you know, this should be shown to Chatanim. It's something very good in Chatan classes of explaining it, because once we get this, it's the total opposite of what we see on TV, right? If you see a TV, like a sex scene on TV, what happens? They start kissing. Within 5 seconds, they finished. Everyone's been happy, right? It's like, no. This is, you know, let's say, you know, nice words and love, and let's go slow. And like, I think it's so impressive that he's discussing all these things. And this showed us that this is Judaism's attitude. You know, this is what it should be. It should be a special moment between a husband and a wife. It should be loving and passionate, and you know, the husband cares about the wife's pleasure as well. Okay. Let's stop sharing for a second. What's the time? How are we doing? Okay. Sorry. I'm getting my kids cold and getting a sore throat. Okay, so Rav Norman Lam, who only passed away a couple of years ago, he was the president of YU. He wrote a book on this topic as well, on intimacy in Judaism. And he says, he discusses a lot about sexual ethics and things that we see in Judaism that come up, which one of the, an example of which is yichud. He says there are things that Chazal talk about, and they say, times have changed. you know, like there are a lot of halachot, because in the time the Gemara was written, women left the house about once a month. And there were, you know, the Gemara discussed that and how often they left the house. They didn't have jobs. They were looking after the kids. They lived more like in a family setting. It was just quite rare for women to go like very far out of the house, not into like their garden, but far away to like the shuk, to the market, things like that. And the things like that, they say hishtanuitim, times have changed. You know, today it's different. I don't think most people would have an issue with women leaving the house more than once a month. But we don't say that about certain ethics, about our ethics of Judaism. We don't lose those. And the same applies to yichud, right? Yichud is, you know, when a man and a wife, a man and a woman who are not related are not allowed to be alone together. And when people that aren't Jewish or people that aren't from or whatever hear this, a lot of people laugh. They're like, that is so ridiculous. Like, you guys are taking this way too far. But I've heard from him, and also in a podcast with another rabbi, that people were saying, you know, this whole movement of the Me Too movement, and all these unfortunate allegations that are coming out about sexual harassment. So imagine if we had yichud, that Bezos Hashem, that would change. It wouldn't be, I mean, unfortunately, you know, these things always happen, but we can hope they won't. But I think it would be a lot less prevalent, and it's still very relevant today. What's the issue today is that we've lost like the sense of intimacy. We've lost the intimacy between a husband and a wife, that, you know, being alone together, that touching, that speaking in a certain way, that should only be between a husband and a wife. And because these lines are getting blurred, especially, you know, where's been the most sexual harassment is in offices and you know, in Hollywood, it happens a lot. And when you ask these men about it, they're like, of course I respect women. You know, they don't see that they don't have an issue respecting women, but when you ask them about the harassment that they committed, they say, oh, that was nothing. What, I said a few lewd jokes to her, it was nothing. Oh, I touched her a bit, it was nothing. Because we're blurring these lines, like they're just getting lost in society. It's crazy, like these lines of intimacy, it's getting so blurred that therefore, like, they go over them and they don't see it as an issue, that they've stepped over this line. So yeah, that's something quite crazy that's happening today. So I'm going to finish off with two more sources from Rav Soloveitchik and Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, both very, very big figures in the modern Orthodox world. Rav Soloveitchik was in America. He says, okay, and they both speak English on a very high level, so we'll try and understand it together. I had to look up some of these words before. So Rav Soloveitchik has a book called Family Redeemed, where he talks about marriage and family and Jewish values. And he says a covenantal marriage is a hedonic, which is the goddess of pleasure, pleasure-oriented community. Judaism did not overlook or underestimate the physical aspects of marriage. On the contrary, once sacrificial withdrawal from the sinful erotic paradise of change and variety is completed, the natural element in marriage comes to the fore. So when we get out of this idea that we need variety and we need different people all the time to keep us excited, then we can really understand what's going on. The two partners owe each other not only fidelity, but also full gratification of their sexual needs. Marriage without carnal enjoyment and erotic love is contrary to human nature and is to be dissolved. So what you're saying, we don't dismiss human nature. We know these things exist. We just want to find a way in Judaism to express them in the proper way, which we believe is within the bounds of marriage and obviously within the laws of Niddah. And yeah, I'm going to keep reading. The ethic of marriage is hedonistic, not monistic. So like pleasure-centered, not pain-centered. Sexual life is legitimate even when it is divorced from other goals, being reproduction, right? It doesn't just have to be for reproduction. Once again, God approves of the hedon involved in the sex act for its own sake, hedon being pleasure. We're saying Hashem approves of pleasure, right? It's good. We see it as a good thing for a husband and wife to give each other pleasure. Judaism could not approve of the natural sex life without subjecting it to a remedial process of purification, as it was too well aware of the evils intrinsic in an unchaste life, in unharnessed and undisciplined sexual practices, in lewdness and in sexual lust, in the sordidness and despicability of sexual arrogance and animal-like behavior. So we do know that these things exist, right? We don't pretend that these don't exist either, but it's easy to descend to those levels and that they exist in our world, like you know, depravity and lewdness But we must have some kind of purification, right? We must have some way of, although we definitely think pleasure is a good thing, we have to keep it holy, right? Everything we do in this world, when we talk about why we make brachot, it's to elevate the physical acts of what do we do in this world, very physical things. We eat, we go to the bathroom, and we say brachot with all of these things, right? To make sure that we're bringing Hashem into the world and we're elevating them to a higher level. Then we have Rav Lichtenstein, who was the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivat Har Etzion in Gush. He says, our commitment to sexuality, properly sanctified, redeemed and redeeming, does not derive from lustful passion, but rather is grounded in profound spiritual instincts upon our recognition that Hashem saw all he created and he beheld it was very good. On one hand, Hashem understands everything he created in the world. Hashem put everything in this world. He put our desires and our struggles and everything into this world, and he understands those. That's on the one hand, and our quest for meaningful interpersonal commingling on the other. It is for us not merely an instrument for parallel intense enjoyment, nor a vehicle for reciprocal consumption. So it's not just for us to give each other pleasure. It is rather a fundamental component in a comprehensive relationship. At once, both an aspect of that relationship and a means towards molding its totality. Tis our honed perception of cleaving to his wife that they become one flesh, partly carnal, right, partly sexual, yet powerfully existential in another. Consequently, impelled by our spiritual instincts and animated by the faith instilled in us by our Torah mentors, we opt for consecration rather than abstinence, right? So we could go for the abstinence. We could say that we understand that, intimacy can go down into these base lustful carnal levels, but we choose to consecrate it. We choose to actively make it holy. We choose to take it and put it in a relationship in a way that is going to make it holy, that is going to bring us closer together as a couple. And that's the option we choose. In this most sensitive area, we strive for a life which is energized rather than neutralized, not merely sterilized and sanitized, but ennobled and ennobling. We are challenged to sanctify by integrating sexuality within total sacred existence, characterized by the systole and diastole, the opening and closing of divinely ordained denial and realization, and by infusing the relationship itself with human and spiritual content. This is by no means the easier course, but may we have the wisdom and the commitment to render it the better. So Rav Lichtenstein understands. He understands that it's not so easy. It's not so easy to say, maybe it'd be easier if we just abstained. We were like shut ourselves in a convent, and we said we're just not going to even go there. But he says, no, as Jews, we believe we can live in the physical world. We can live in the physical world, and we can take the things that happen, and we can sanctify them, and we can take this aspect of life that we know exists and Hashem knows exists, and make it holy. So in conclusion, do we see intimacy as something hefker when we can just do anything we want? There's no limits, there's no boundaries. Of course not. We still have halacha surrounding all of this. We have, the halachot of nida, of tarat mishpacha. We have halachot in the bedroom. There are halachot, of what we can and can't do. But we also do, we don't just see it for having children. No, we've disproven that several times over. It's not just for having children. It's also very, it's been said very explicitly, it's, also to provide one another, the husband and wife should provide one another pleasure, but it's also for an emotional closeness. It's an important part of a marriage, of a relationship. But what we saw from our last couple of sources from Aaron is that the most important part is we take this very physical aspect of our lives and we make sure that we're using it in our marriages in the correct way to bring us, man and wife closer together. And also to elevate it, that it should, should be something holy. It should be something that is taking our marriage to a higher level, also spiritually. Not that, people are like davening at that time, but that it is something that is bringing in a marriage, which we see as as a very, very important part of Judaism, that it's bringing it to a higher level. So yeah, that's all. That's pretty good timing, 9:16. So I think now we're going to stop the recording.